begin with understanding your own cycle and what hormones are in play. Become the expert of your body. And as you're becoming the expert, you can share with the next generation or other generations or friends. I believe both of us are really about informed consent. Is doing what's best for your body, but understanding the hormones involved, understanding how nutrition plays a role in what you're experiencing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast for women looking to have a safe transition off birth control and heal their hormones naturally. Today, I have a special guest. Heather Allmendinger is the founder of Vivydus, the full of life company, and host of the Embracing Flow podcast, a certified fertility awareness educator, triple certified health coach, speaker, and best-selling author. She is passionate about helping girls, women, and families build body literacy, navigate hormonal transitions, and make informed health decisions with confidence. Through education and advocacy, Heather is working to create the conversations many women wish they had sooner. So Heather, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Taylor, so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And we're doing a little podcast swap here. So Heather's on my podcast, obviously, and then we're going to switch gears. I'm going to be on her podcast. So definitely check that out. But Heather, tell us a little bit about, I mean, your bio is like super impressive. So I can't wait to dive in and share all the knowledge that you have. But tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to the point of doing what you do now.
It's been a wonderful, crazy, non-linear path, as most of our journeys have been. I was in corporate world. I became a corporate refugee, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So I became a health coach. Through health coaching, one of my certifications was in pregnancy, and I absolutely loved it. So dove into that a little bit, dove into fertility a little bit. Friend of mine, mentor, said, hey, would you be open to looking into the trying to conceive space? I was like, yeah, I had secondary unexplained infertility for 14 months prior to this journey of going into health coaching. So I was like, sure. In that time diving into that area, I realized we do not know enough about our cycles. There were individuals who were trying to conceive and didn't realize that you can't get pregnant throughout your entire cycle, that there's a very tiny window. And even after that window, it takes several days for that fertilized egg to even reach the uterus and to start burrowing into the endometrial lining. So I was like, all right, I want to learn more about that. So I took some fertility awareness courses, and in that course is where I really found my passion in changing the generational taboo and that gap of mothers not knowing what's going on and talking to their daughters about puberty and how puberty as well as perimenopause are linked. It's kind of the opposite ends of that reproductive bell curve. But the thing that really screamed at me was in that one course, finding out that how our cycles present themselves as teenagers can be used as predictors of health and metabolic disease in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. It can be used to predict possible diabetes, heart disease, stroke. And I was like, whoa, why weren't we taught this? Why was it just, oh yeah, you're going to get this and it can be shut off and it's only for babies? When it is so much more than that. So I had that deep gut feeling that I wanted to scream it from the rooftops. And that's where Vivydus started. The Full of Life company was with the health coaching. Embracing Flow is all about that body literacy, encouraging women to really get to know their body, understanding what it's trying to communicate, because it is always communicating with us, and really understanding that cycle that is uniquely yours, even though females have it and it's different for each one, but it's unique to each individual, but 50% of the population has it or has the ability to have it.
Yeah. And I meant to say this earlier, but where we originally connected is we were both in some Facebook groups about women, being on birth control, wanting to come off birth control. And we both provide free value and just literacy to women. And we were joking when we first connected, but there's just so much misinformation there in those groups. And so we're talking about how we had to kind of take a step back sometimes, and because it can be so frustrating as providers who are just like, man, women are just so, unfortunately, not because of their own doing, but they're just so uninformed. And it can be really daunting when, we're trying to we're really going against the grain. We're like fish swimming against the current with all of these things. And, I love the fact that you're trying to catch women at younger ages as young girls to prevent this from spiraling, because I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure you've had this too, where women are like, man, I wish I knew you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I was going through this, and they didn't have this support. So by really, getting to the root of these things and educating young girls of like, hey, your period is your fifth vital sign, which like we never learn. It's just as important as heart rate, blood pressure, all that kind of stuff, respiration. But we are kind of taught that it's something to be feared, or it's something to like, that's yucky, or, you don't talk about it. I was just on another podcast the other day where she was like, talking about that, how she grew up in Europe and how it's like, there's condoms and bowls out and there's like tampons out, and it's not as secretive as it is in the United States. And so I think that's also something where the more we're talking about it and just bringing light to like, if your period hurts or if you don't feel good, like talk about these things versus it being like, shush, shush, like let's take you to the doctor and put you on birth control to like get rid of it, quote unquote.
Yeah. And it's a lot of the things that I learned and I wish I had me
Yep.
as
I
a
wish I had
teenager.
me and you back then too.
Because I did have those horrible periods.
Yeah.
I did have those heavy bleedings. My mother would get a phone call every single month from the nurse's office because I was vomiting. I could barely move. I was bleeding through pads every half hour to 45 minutes. There was one time that I arrived at school and bled through my pants, went to the nurse's office, got some wonderful, weird, one-use only underwear, which I was like, that's kind of creepy to begin with. But then the huge pool noodle pad that you get usually after maternity wards, after you've had a baby, that goes from like your belly button to the top of your butt crack. At least that's what it felt like as a 7th grader. The worst part of that experience was given white sweatpants.
That seems like a portrait.
And I'm like, oh, I showed up in dark blue pants and I'm leaving the nurse's office in white sweatpants. So I'm pretty sure there were some questions on that, but I had those experiences. And looking back of what I've gone through, I've also, like I said before, I had that secondary unexplained infertility. My first pregnancy was fine. My second pregnancy, I had gestational diabetes. And knowing what I know now, I probably do have insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance. I know there's some inflammation going on. But the beautiful thing is I used to have horrible periods, heavy periods, painful periods. I don't have them anymore. And it's not because the birth control fixed me, because I have been on the birth control. But I found out that my mood swings were the PMS. I found out what foods make the cramps worse and what foods help. Mm-hmm. And when I had my first needed or medical intervention period that didn't hurt, I was like, why didn't I have this for the last 30 years? Because I started cycling when I was 10. Mm-hmm. And I was in my mid-40s. So I went for 30 years of dealing with this and being told, it's normal. Yep. When it's not. Our periods are to be pain-free. They're designed to be minimally to pain-free. They're designed to be something that we look at as a doctor's visit. It's an internal health barometer every single cycle. But we're taught in school, it's going to be yucky. Mm-hmm. It's going to be shameful. And you can see it in the elementary school girls. You see the 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders that are all having fun. Their shoulders are back. No big deal. As they get older into the teen years, you can watch those shoulders. And it's not necessarily the weight on the front of their chest that's causing it. I think it's some of their embarrassment that their bodies are changing. They're going from that rectangle that they've known to an S shape. or an hourglass shape or a pear shape, which is their body's design, and they're embarrassed by it. And it needs to, it's sad.
Yeah. So how are you like going out into the community? Like talk a little bit about how you're making an impact to educate young girls and build up that confidence so they don't feel like that and you can, really make a lasting impact for generations to come with just educating them younger.
I let them know that what they are going through is natural. It's normal. It's happening to all of their friends at different times. For some, you could be 9 or 10. For others, you could be 16. But even when that shows up is an indication of your health. But even that, it's looking at it, being observant. How often does it show up? Is it brown? Is it red? Is it pink? Is it super heavy? And yes, sometimes it may smell because it is blood. But all of those are your body's way of releasing and understanding what is normal and typical versus what is something that needs to be addressed and brought to a caregiver or parent. And then from there, if medical intervention may be needed. And then being the advocate and understanding that medication may not be the best answer.
Mm-hmm.
It may reduce the symptoms, but it might not be the best answer.
So I'm sure a lot of listeners who are listening to this, and I've talked about this before in previous episodes, but as a reminder, I think it's really important. And if you're new to the podcast, let's talk a little about what a healthy period should look like. Because you mentioned colors, you mentioned smell, you mentioned flow, because I'm sure a lot of people don't know like a lot of women listening don't know what that is. So can you briefly describe like what a healthy period should look like, ideally, knowing that there's going to be some variability between every single person, but.
From my training, I am certified through the Fertility Education and Medical Management. Their certification, their teachings to me on how we determine what a normal period looks like. A short cycle, and I'm going to go kind of cycles in general and then the actual period. There's several different types of cycles. There's the short cycle, which is under 18 days. In the beginning when periods start and you start cycling with puberty, it could take up to 2 years for that cycle to become regular. But if you're 2 years into it and your cycle is under 18 days, that could be an indication that the hormones in your body aren't quite reaching the level to have a healthy reproductive system. There's the standard, I call it standard cycle because regular and standard can get a little bit confusing. So I call it the standard cycle, which is that 24 to 36 days. And then there's the long cycle of 37 plus days. When it comes to periods and bleeding, there's light days. There's spotting, which is just some brown spotting, and that can happen. Mm-hmm. That's sometimes lower progesterone. It could be several different things, but spotting can happen, and that can be normal in the beginning. Bleeding. Light is 1 to 2 period products changes a day. Medium, 3 to 4.
And just to clarify, like the beginning of your cycle, it'll progress, right? For most people. So at the beginning of the cycle, you might use 1 to 2, but then like 3 days in, 4 days in, 5 days in, then that's when you're like, 1 to 2 is still light. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And it's a healthy period is usually 3 to 7 days. But within those 3 to 7 days, it's having 1 to 2 days of medium to heavy bleed. And that medium is that 3 to 4 product changes, pads. I know it's kind of challenging a little bit with period underwear. That's why when I teach individuals first, wear a pad, if you're comfortable with tampons, you can wear the tampon. Even a menstrual cup, it'll give you a little bit of an idea on what your flow volume is, because that's your body telling you where your hormones are inside your body and how they're functioning. Heavy is 5 or more product changes a day or less than an hour in between product changes. You might have 1 day of that, and that is considered normal. If you're having, if you're having 4, 5, 6 days of heavy bleeding, that is an indication of your body's communicating with you that something's out of alignment. The color is that bright red, very much like if you poke your finger and you start bleeding. It's that bright red. Darker red is older blood. Brown is even older because the oxygen gets to it and it turns brown. Pink is kind of it's fresh blood, but it's not a lot escaping from the endometrial lining. So it could be that your endometrial lining is leaking a little bit and it's being flushed out of your system quickly, but you look for that bright red blood. That's kind of how you can see if your periods are typical and normal. As I said before, they are to be pain-free. If they are painful, you could have high prostaglandins, which is what can cause uterine cramping. It can cause intestinal cramping. There's ways to reduce prostaglandin production through lifestyle, through foods. It could be you have high estrogen, and there's ways to balance that with progesterone naturally, without the hormonal birth control, without medications, through lifestyle, through movement, through sleep. I go back to the 4 pillars of health with all of this. But when it comes to that typical period and that typical cycle, 3 to 7 days, little to no pain, bright red bleeding for heavier bleeding for at least 1 day to 3 days. If you're seeing something outside of that, reach out to somebody who's familiar with cycles. And yes, it can be a medical provider, because there is a place for them. And the one thing that I share with individuals, because they're like, well, you're not a doctor. No, I'm not. I am not a certified physician. But if you think of doctorates in general, doctorate of education, Taylor, what's a doctorate of education? What do they do?
Of education, like a professor?
Yeah. They earned a doctorate in education.
Mm-hmm.
Doctorate of philosophy. They understand philosophy. Doctorate of medicine, your typical medical doctor, earned a doctorate in medication. So they understand our symptoms. And then they find the medication to help mitigate those symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that's the path that you so choose to go, that's great. Be informed of that decision.
And for most of what we're describing, that medication is likely birth control.
Yep.
Yeah.
Know the pros, know the cons,
Yep.
What the side effects are, what you are willing to accept side effects wise. If the side effects are too much, how long do you have to be on that medication before the provider will change the medication? And then what is the next step? And it's the pros and cons, short-term and long-term.
And I think that's where, I talk about this a lot too, especially when I'm a guest on podcasts. And speaking events, I always feel like I need to make the disclaimer of I'm not anti-birth control. I think it's a very important decision that women have and should have the right to make on their own. And at the same time, I'm anti-non-informed consent, where it's just given out and women are led to believe, because there's such lack of education around it, that there's no side effects of it. I know when I started it at 18 years old, because I lost my period, it didn't fix that symptom, right? I didn't realize I wasn't actually having a period on birth control until 10 years later. But I was just handed it and said, just stay on this till you want to get pregnant. And when my mom and I asked, is it okay to stay on it for years at a time? They're like, oh yeah, it's totally fine. And so we didn't think anything of it. Come to find out, it was secretly sabotaging my skin. My acne was even worse when I came off. It was making my anxiety really bad. It was messing with my digestion, all of these things over the 10 plus years I was on birth control. So that's why when I stopped, I had the experience many women have, because we didn't get to the root causes, and birth control was making those things worse over time. So, that's why I know you and I are both passionate about educating women so they can make informed decisions, whether it's to be on birth control, which is totally fine, or whether it's to, do some lab testing, get to the deeper root causes of those things and fix them naturally.
Yep. And it goes back to that cycle. That period is telling you what's going on.
Yep.
If you know what those symptoms and signs are. And that's where you and I, we understand that. And as much as traditional medicine would love to, they don't have the time. Or necessarily, some of them don't even have the knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is sad to say. But that's kind of where we're at, which is why I believe both of us are really about informed consent.
Mm-hmm.
Is doing what's best for your body, but understanding the hormones involved, understanding how nutrition plays a role in what you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to talk to, like, let's say a mom is listening of a daughter, or, she is someone who wants to be a mom one day. And if she has a daughter, what advice would you give someone listening? How can you start these conversations with people or with young girls or maybe it's someone who like maybe doesn't have kids, but they're like an aunt or a mentor to young girls, right? Like, how can they be a piece of this bigger movement of educating women, young girls, and informing them of their body and making it so it's not a taboo topic. And so they know what to look out for and when to bring, concerns to whoever.
One, I would say for the moms, the caregivers, the aunts, the adults, understand your cycle.
Your
Begin
own
with
cycle.
understanding your own
Yep.
cycle and what hormones are in play, how they represent themselves in your own body. Become the expert of your body. And as you're becoming the expert, you can share with the next generation or other generations or friends. If you hear that they have heavy cycles, ask questions. If you are a new mom, this conversation is going to come up. I'm not sure I've come across any parent that takes care of their child that child at some point does not visit them in the bathroom. If you have your period and they ask, keep it simple, keep it age appropriate, but talk about it. Bring your partner into it because this cycle impacts your relationship. Being on it, there was the study of how hormonal birth control actually impacts how we choose mates. So that's was a very interesting study and a very interesting conversation. But it's learn your body, learn the basics, share it, be open with it. I don't know of any household that doesn't people don't talk about, oh, I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go pee, or I'm going to go poop. It's part of life, as is going through puberty, and our body's changing. If for some reason we've gotten it that we don't talk about it, so open those conversations. You start seeing hair darkening on your child's legs, breast buds starting, body odor. That starts about 2 years before a first cycle starts. But that is the beginning of puberty. Start talking to them about it. Not in a shameful way. Just, you start saying, this is what's going to happen. Let's make a kit that we're going to put an extra pair of underwear in there, some wipes, get them involved, have them talk about it. Be open and have those open conversations. And it can be a simple sit down and go, to start out, what do you know about your body? Do you know what happens with puberty? And yes, I know school starts and does that in like 4th, 5th, 6th grade. There are some girls that are getting cycles before that conversation is done in school. The earliest I heard was 7 years old that she got her first period. And the part that blows my mind on that is she was 5 when puberty started. So this little girl was barely out of diapers and her body's going through puberty. So she's 7, she gets her period. She's not going to know what this is in class until 4 years later, when we can start these conversations a lot earlier at an age appropriate level, talking about bleeding, talking about what that period is. If they come in and go, Mommy, what are you doing? Or Auntie, what is that? I know somebody who has 2 boys and she paper charts, she colors it in, and she hates coloring. So she asks her boys to color it in. Her boys know. She's like, Mommy's not feeling good today. And they're like, Mommy, are you bleeding? Yep. All right, I'm going to rub your feet, Mommy. Is that okay?
That's a good point too, of like, even if you don't have daughters or, women, young girls in your life, it's like I think it's important to educate men and boys about this too. Like, I know like my fiance has been very educated on these things compared to when he grew up with a brother, right? And a family that didn't deal with these things or talk about these things because there was just, his mom in the house. He sees my tampons in the trash and he cleans the bathrooms. And, I'm very vocal about, hey, I'm on my period. I started my period.
Yep. And I have an 18-year-old son. He knows about it. I've talked to him about it. And he's like, Mom, I shut you out when you talk about this stuff. I said, I understand. This is an uncomfortable topic. My brother does not, and has no interest in hearing anything about it. And he's got daughters. He's got the girls. I've got the boys. But I told my son, I said, you don't have to know all the details about it, but understanding the basics will allow you to just be a better human in general. But it allows you to be a better friend, partner, a better parent, a better coworker, and a better leader. And he kind of looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, you can actually look at your coworkers' productivity levels and you can just, if you're observant to patterns, you can see when productivity level is lower in one of your co-employees or one of your coworkers, and where it's high productivity in another one. You pair them up on projects, you can probably get that project done sooner and possibly even under budget because they're working together at opposite ends of their cycle. And he just looked at me like, you can do that? I said, yes. That is one of the beautiful powers of understanding this cycle. Mm-hmm. But you also have that empathy to understand that your coworker or your employee that's not as productive right now will be in a few days. And just letting them rest and understanding that they're not purposely being unproductive. It's their body's just not allowing them to be as productive as they had been a couple weeks ago. And they're probably harder on themselves than what you're going to be. And they're probably wondering, what is wrong with me? I was knocking off my to-do list 3 days ago, and now I can barely stay awake. I can barely focus on this document. What is wrong with me? And it's just where your body's at in its cycle.
Yeah. And if this is new information to you, basically the gist of what we're talking about is how our society is built off of a men's hormonal cycle, where it's a 24-hour clock versus women, it's a 28-ish day, depending on your cycle length clock. And so there are points in our cycle, for example, when we're ovulating, we are more high energy, we are more like social, we are more quote unquote productive versus when we are menstruating, we're on our period or maybe our luteal phase where we are more tired. That's our, fall and winter. That's where we like need to rest. That's when you can reflect. That's things like that. And so if you haven't listened to, I interviewed a cycle coach, Janina, a couple episodes ago. So if you're interested in this, go back and listen to that because we talk about how you can utilize your cycle to be more productive with work, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you are someone who works, a corporate job, or even as a mom. We talked about stay-at-home moms, how you can use your cycle to your advantage based on what tasks you are doing versus being like pushing yourself. I know I used to push myself through tasks of like, oh, I have to get 3 carousel posts done for next week, or I have to record this podcast versus now that I'm aware of my cycle, it's like this week, for example, I'm like, I have no creativity in my brain. I'm finishing up my period. This is a time where I can like sit back and reflect and do some other things versus in a few weeks, I know I'll get that productivity or I'll get that creativity back. And I'll be like, yeah, I can't wait to write this. And I have so much inspiration and all that versus before I would try and like fight that and be like, oh, I have to do this now versus like using it, aligning it with my body.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that starts shortly after cycling becomes kind of regular. So if you go to those teenage girls, potentially try and get tests during your luteal phase. I know it's not always possible to schedule those tests, but study during your follicular phase and take the test during your luteal because your body is able to recall the information. And I have a friend of mine she's an athletic coach, and she's been an athletic coach for many, many years. She was a power lifter. She's a gold, she's not an Olympian, but she's won gold in powerlifting. She didn't understand cycle sync. She didn't understand ovulation. She didn't understand any of this until I started talking to her. And she told me, she goes, that makes a lot of sense. She said, my personal records, my personal bests, because she did track in a way her cycle, but for her, it was just when her period started. But she noticed like every 2 weeks, she'd have a personal record. It's like, that was probably right around ovulation and right before menstruation. Mm-hmm. For some, that's what happens. You have that final surge of kind of that estrogen, the progesterone's dropping, but you have that estrogen and a little bit of testosterone before your period starts. Yep. And you can do that personal. You can have those personal records.
I have that. Like right before my period starts, it's almost like my body wants to get shit done before I'm, in my rest digest phase. So I used to think that was because everyone talks about your luteal phase being so bad. But I think that's another piece of this conversation is like, as someone who like understanding your own cycle and also recognizing if you have symptoms that shouldn't be there, getting support for that so that you can be a role model of like and I don't mean this in a bad way, but like, you're not just going to sit there and take it anymore. You're not going to just normalize this. You get the support you need to feel better so you don't have periods that take you down. Like, because it's normal to have those ebbs and flows, but you shouldn't be down for the count, getting sick, missing work, stuck on the couch with a heating pad, or missing your cycle. Like that's another thing. We talked a lot about heavy periods, but if you're missing your cycle or if you have mood swings or anxiety or, skin issues, like those types of things, they impact you and that will show. If you don't feel your best self, you can't be the best wife, mother, aunt, role model, whatever. So not only understanding your cycle, but also, if you don't have a healthy cycle or healthy hormones, getting support for that. So then you can be your best for other ones that you support and love.
Yeah. And it's kind of goes back with that long cycle. Once you're hitting 37 to 45 days, you have that multiple times a year. That's your body saying something's out of alignment. Your hormones are one of the 12. Your body's communicating with you. If you're missing 3 or more cycles in a year, it's your body communicating something's not right. I know that athletes, sometimes they pride themselves on the fact that they lose their period for months and months and months. And what they see it as an asset, and other girls teens see it as an asset. Oh, you don't have your period. That's fantastic. The flip side of that, though, is your bone density is being impacted. Your health in general is being impacted. There have been athletes that have ignored missing their periods for so long that it almost killed them, and it ruined their career because they could not function. And I found out was all linked back to their cycle. They were under eating, overperforming, and it all goes back again. I know it sounds like a broken record, but that your period is an indicator of your internal health. Yep. It can definitely tell you if insulin resistance going on, inflammation's going on. Thyroid, if you're tracking basal body temperature, and I know the Oura Ring isn't exactly FDA approved for basal body temperature, or if you use a temp drop and you see your temperature rising unexpectedly, it can let you know that you're getting sick. And in a few days, your body's letting you know ahead of time, hey, you know what, you're going to be getting sick, let's prepare. But it can also be that your thyroid is starting to malfunction for whatever reason. It is absolutely amazing how we are designed And when we learn the different ways our body communicates, what we can learn from our body about our health. And a lot of that comes from our period and our cycles.
Yeah. So viewing it as this is a marker of health, not something to fear or that's working against you. Cause I think that's the other narrative is like, you know, if I have a bad period, like my body's broken, it's working against me. Like, why is it like this? Like, we're just taught to like take a medication and like get rid of it versus digging deeper of like, what is my body trying to communicate with me?
Yeah, and you're seeing that now in the kind of the perimenopause, menopause space. Um, why is my body deceived? Why is my body not functioning correctly? Why is it against me? Why is it betraying me? And it's not that it's betraying you. It's your hormones are changing very much. If you think about going through puberty, your body was changing and it was a confusing time. And I know we don't want to always think about going back to our teenage years and going through that time, but our bodies were changing and we became who we are today through that change. As we reach our perimenopause years, it's not going to take 2 years. It can sometimes take longer. But instead of our estrogen and progesterone and these hormones working in a cyclical way and hitting peak levels as best as possible with the fuel that we put in our body and how we live our life, the ovaries are beginning to stop the production of some of those hormones. And it's being transferred to the adrenal glands. So, yes, your estrogen may be high compared to your progesterone, which is usually the case. And they sometimes they fluctuate together. Sometimes they fluctuate opposite. It's just fueling your body and understanding what your body's trying to communicate and what it needs. You can get through perimenopause and into menopause with support without medication, but without medication. You can do it. I've seen it. I'm living proof of it. Is it easier for me to possibly or potentially take HRT? Yes, but I don't want to put that information. I don't want to put that medication inside my body when my body's doing exactly what it is supposed to and designed to do.
Mm-hmm.
We are designed to reduce those hormones as we age, so that way we can become wise women and our hormones can level out, and we can start a new chapter of more of a linear, flat hormonal life, similar to where we were before puberty. It's the end of that bell curve. And when we look at it kind of, some people say it's cougar puberty, sometimes it's reverse puberty, depending on how you want to look at it. Depending on how I look at it as cougar puberty, I think it's kind of funny but I know for others, it's a very uncomfortable way of living right now because you have that brain fog, you're gaining weight, but it's your body just changing and learning. If you learn what your body needs to get through the cycles in your reproductive years, you can actually use that as you go through perimenopause and into menopause. So that way it may not be as bad. And the moms that are going through perimenopause and the daughters that are going through puberty, talk to each other because most likely you're going through the same thing. It's just on different ends of your lifespan. Bring in the other parental, bring in the dad, because if the mom's going through perimenopause, the dad might be going through andropause, which is that lowering of testosterone. So communication breaks down and you just got a hormonal hurricane going on in your house. You love your spouse, you love your kid, but you don't want to be near any of them. Your kid loves their parents. And it's not the parents just don't understand. It's you've got all these hormones going on. And if you talk about how you're feeling, and sometimes it's challenging, but if you know where each of you are coming from and you understand your bodies, you can communicate it and it'll bring harmony to your life versus more chaos. Mm-hmm. And it can be as simple as a little wheel that says where you are in your cycle. because where you are in your cycle can determine how you communicate. We kind of talked about that a little bit before. But then dad knows what's going on and how to communicate with his partner and or child. It just open up that door of communication. I have seen understanding cycles save marriages.
I believe it. And this whole conversation is really about body literacy. You have to understand your cycle first because that will empower you to know what's going on versus so many of us learn the hard way of like, what the heck is happening in my body? And because doctors are educated in this, it's, our medical system is not built for women. Even now, women weren't included in clinical research trials till the 1990s. And even now, there's a lot less research on us because we're more quote unquote complicated because of our cyclical hormone levels. It's it's very sparse in the research. And so really understanding, and I'll just throw some resources out there too for you. And you, Heather, I'd love to hear yours if you have different ones or additional ones. But if you want to understand your cycle and just start learning about these things more, I mean, me and Heather both have our podcast, so that's great. That's a good resource or good resources. A couple books, In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. That was the first book that I read to learn all this stuff. Beyond the Pill by Dr. Jolene Brighton. This Is Your Brain on Birth Control by Sarah Hill. Those are my top three. I know Alyssa Vitti has Women Code too. Do you have any other recommendations?
I started, if you're interested in cycle syncing and kind of understanding, uh, she's a little bit more of the matriarchy and how the matriarchy was ruled the tribes and how the patriarchy decided to take over. So if you're kind of into that, The Revolution Will Be Bloody by Sasha Washburn. She explains lunication, which is how our cycles match up to the moon. She explains cycle syncing, and she has 5 different phases because of that. We briefly talked about that fifth kind of phase where our energy peaks right before our periods start. She has that as like a deep luteal. She explains cycles charting and the information that you can get from charting. She has a beautiful mandala charting system that has people, a lady, and it's a fan, and so if you're into coloring, you can track your food that you eat, your poop. That's kind of where I started. She has the period coaching school, so The Revolution Will Be Bloody. And she also just recently came out with a book called Bloody Brilliant Business. So that is one of my big resources is Stasha. She has a podcast, The Period Besties, with Kate Bresick, which is literally her best friend. Both of them have been on Embracing Flow. The other one is Straight Talk About Birth Control from Michael Gaskins, and just gives you a little bit of history on birth control so you're become familiar a little bit about how it came in to play and the impact. Another one that I do like, it's more of a documentary. It's sometimes kind of hard to get a hold of, is The Business of Birth Control.
Mm-hmm. They have an
Just to
Instagram too.
just to understand how these medications do impact you, but that also gives you understanding on your body a little bit and how in the last 50 years, things have changed so dramatically. Those are kind of my top picks, and I know I have other ones, but the ones that are coming to mind right now, like I said, Stasha is definitely matriarchy, and she does go into the history of how women did rule and how the revolution will be bloody, and if the matriarchy does come back. But she explains a lot, though, of what is going on in the body and what foods to incorporate during different phases, activities, and just really understanding the body along with the resources that you shared, Taylor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I listed a couple of those down that I haven't looked into, so I'm gonna explore those myself. Um, Okay, so to wrap up, is there anything else that you feel like is important for listeners to know about given this conversation of empowering women, young girls about their cycles, about body literacy, about, not staying stuck dealing with symptoms and that there are other ways to feel better and that's not their destiny?
There's two big things. Again, that period is a body sign. It is a fifth vital sign. It is a doctor's visit every single month without the scale. It is just as important as your weight, as your blood pressure, as your heart rate. Anything that the doctor does when you walk into the door before they ever even talk to you, your period is just as important, if not more so, because it gives a very good idea of what's going on in your body. And the other, besides learning about what your body needs and how it communicates, be that advocate. If you do not like the options given to you by your medical provider, feel free to find another medical provider.
I talk about it all the time.
Feel free to push back and say, you know what, what are the side effects? I am here. What are the other options? I'm having these issues. I am not going to hear. I'm not going to accept that this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to accept that it's my age, it's hormones. I understand it might be hormones, but what is going on? Is there another option besides medication? And you may have to find a nutritionist. You may have to find individuals like Taylor or I to help you understand your body, to get a better understanding of what your body needs. But you have that ability. You have that autonomy. It is your body. You have that choice to make a different decision besides what that board certified doctor is telling you.
Yep.
Because that board certified doctor is still human. They are trained in medication. That is going to be their first step. But you have the ability to look elsewhere and to dig deeper and to find the root cause of your symptoms, because those symptoms are your body telling you it needs attention.
Very well said. Yeah, I think this is such a good conversation for, everyone to listen to, regardless of how old you are. And, this is a good episode to pass along to another woman in your life who needs this, or maybe they're struggling with this, their daughter's struggling with symptoms, you're kind of stuck of what to do. I think this is a great example of, and I have a whole podcast episode of how I fired my doctor, and I went somewhere else. And I don't recommend this for most people, but I run labs in my own self. And so I kind of like manage my care because I have that knowledge and I feel burned by the conventional medical system. But, that's, I also am not a doctor. And, there's a time and a place for those people, for those providers. But knowing who to look for, and, it might look like working with someone like Heather or I to dig deeper with you because of the lack of education and knowledge that physicians do have around this. And even, holistic doctors, a lot of times they aren't running the right labs or they're not looking at the right places. And unfortunately, most of us have to figure that out the hard way. But that's why Heather and I open our businesses and are super passionate about educating women and helping them, get the support they need finally.
And if you want to learn more, if you want to hear more, if you want to dive deeper into your own health, I did link a free resource, Embracing Your Cycle, a body literacy guide for tweens, teens, and families. It goes into the two major hormones in your cycle, but it explains those two heavy hitter hormones, cycles. It gives you a tracker and explains how to use that tracker. It's kind of the first chapter of your body literacy. It's the bare bones basics. I wrote it for parents to start talking to their daughters and to their children. But a 12-year-old, a 9, 10, 12-year-old can read that and get a better idea of what's going on or what's going to happen in a science educational way.
I love that. And where can people, so we'll link all the resources below and where to find you. Where's the best place to connect with you if someone's interested in learning more and working with you?
Embracing Flow podcast is a great one. I have those experts on, as well as I have flow questions. I have flow facts just different things. You can find me on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere podcasts you listen to your podcast. You can also find me on Facebook at Heather M. Allmendinger or Heather Martin Allmendinger. That link will be in the show notes because, well, Heather's an easy name to spell. Allmendinger is a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we'll put all that in all those links below so you can connect with her more in depth and listen to her podcast. So, okay, to wrap everything up, I always like to ask my guests how you are nourishing yourself recently.
Recently, I have allowed myself to go into a winter hibernation mode. I have been in we talk about seasons, we talk about cycles and the menstruation, follicular, ovulation, luteal, and we have those on a cyclical basis. But we also, in the grand scheme of things, we also have life seasons. And I have been in follicular and ovulation and visible for a very long time. And I have given myself permission to enter winter and to not be on social media as much, to not release as many podcasts as much, to take naps during the day. And I have that ability to do that. But even if I were in the corporate world still, I give myself permission to relax and to have those down days, to have that sink full of dishes, to have the piles of laundry that I will eventually get to. It's giving myself permission to breathe and to do nothing. And that has taken many, many, many years to be comfortable with even the idea of giving myself time to just be.
That I think most women that come on the show, that's the vibe I'm getting from a lot of people, including myself. It's those of us who are type A overachievers, entrepreneurs, just go-getter women. We are getting in this season where we're like, it's just not worth killing ourselves to do XYZ. Like what I was talking about with myself, that's something I'm learning where before I'd be like, oh, I have to always have 3 Instagram posts that go out next week or else, whatever, or I have to do this, this, this. And now it's just like, okay, my business is going to burn down. I'm not going to lose that dream client or, because I don't put 3 posts out next week, but it's just breaking that rigidity and just giving yourself an effing break. Like that's where where
Mhm.
I'm at too. It's just, it's not worth, killing yourself and your health to try and reach perfectionism because it's just, you're never going to get there. And that's not what we're here to do.
Nope. And I'm finding my creativity comes when I get in the dirt and get my hands dirty and sticking my fingers in that deep, rich, dark dirt. And you see the bugs in there and you're planting the flowers and now I'm watching the flowers grow. That has been this past 2 weeks, a week and a half. That has been my absolute joy, is just having the dirty feet, having the dirty hands, just being covered in dirt because I'm outside getting the vitamin D, smelling the things that are blooming, even though my sinuses do not like them. But it's finding those things that I enjoy. And it's even allowing ourselves to rekindle those things that we enjoy and doing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been loving being outside this week. That was another good point because this past week, I've been heavy on the walking outside versus like my typical weightlifting and stuff like that. And old me would have been like, no, you have to like do your weightlifting routine. And now I'm just like, no, it's so beautiful. It's been a long spring to get warm here in Ohio. And I'm sure for you too, where you're in the Midwest. So,
I'm near Philly.
yep. Do they consider that the Midwest still, or are you East Coast? I
No,
don't
I'm East Coast,
East Coast. I always
Mid-Atlantic,
think it's
East
like Midwest
Coast.
because you're like pretty close to us, but yeah, you're East Coast, I guess. But yeah, it's been a long time to get to this point. So I'm like, now that there's consistent sunshine, it's like, no, like this is what my body is needing, and I'm on my period, and that's just. I'll get back to those weightlifting workouts when I feel like I want to. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And like I said, if this resonated with you, definitely give Heather a follow. And please like, share, leave a review. It really helps grow the show. And I would appreciate that. And until next time, stay nourished, everybody.